Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult, video 172 about rejection of hard atheism. Sometimes I think people assume that I lean towards the inevitably atheistic side in some standard sense, that I have a stick up my ass, I guess, about religion, which I do. Organized religion, as I've said, is a cancer. I think it's largely negative within the world. I wish it didn't exist on any meaningful level. Spirituality is one thing. When it becomes stagnant, organized, averse to change, averse to acknowledging reality in some cases, and can be misused by politicians to encourage war, to encourage all sorts of problems. Yeah, when it becomes corrupted to that level, I don't see that as any sort of potential spiritual truth. I see it as the antithesis of the same. But hard atheism I also reject. Now, first and foremost, let me say, I'm not making the argument that, atheism is a religion. Some people, when they're theistic, they make that argument, and it falls on deaf ears largely. It falls flat, because it's not a sane argument to make. There is no central organizational structure of atheism other than, hey, I don't believe in a God, and or I know there to be no God. Hard atheism, though, is different from agnostic atheism. Agnostic atheism is simply, I don't believe in a God. I would fall roughly into that group in some sense. I no longer care, and I would be more of a true agnostic, I don't know, I don't care, leave me alone about the issue, it's not of great importance. I've got other things to study within the spiritual realm. The theism versus atheism argument is not only secondary, basically tertiary for me at this point. But the soft atheist says they don't believe. That's a perfectly acceptable thing to say. They're simply in an encounter with a theist. The theist says, I either know there to be a God or I believe there to be a God. The soft atheist has simply rejected that on the basis of disbelief. Well, you haven't fulfilled your burden of proof. You're making a claim that there's a God. If you're a hard theist, not a softer theist, you've claimed absolutely there to be a God, or religion has made that claim. The burden of proof has not been achieved. The hard atheist makes the same claim as the hard theist. The hard atheist says there is no God. It's a gnosis that they claim. They are making a positive claim that there is a lack of a deity, that atheism is true. Insofar as they have separately made that claim, they then have the burden of proof. A lot of times atheists make the mistake of assuming that all atheism is blameless because theism simply has not achieved its burden, therefore a rejection of theism, even a Gnostic rejection thereof, saying absolutely and certainly there's no God, that it doesn't have to have any burden of proof. But that's not actually the case. It's a separate claim. The two claims being opposite one another, supposedly, doesn't make any difference. They've both made a positive claim. The agnostics in the middle, the true agnostic sort of apatheistic crowd, the soft atheists and soft theists are simply saying we believe, or we think, or don't care, don't know. On either side, you have these two poles of people who have both made claims, neither of which can ever achieve their burden of proof. As far as we know, barring God or a pantheon or something coming out of the sky or Satan popping out of a crater or something, it is impossible for a theist to actually prove in any tangible sense, in an observable sense, that their religion is true. All the teleological argument sort of stuff thrown out. Aquinas proved it, by some logical charade that doesn't have any relevance, is no different from hard atheism. They're both making a positive claim. The hard atheist has said there is no God, there is no afterlife, usually there's no afterlife. A hard atheist there's a strong correlation between hard atheism and irreligion. You can be religious without being theistic. There are atheists that go to church. Then it becomes a cultural religious trapping. There are also people who can be spiritual while being even potentially hard atheists. They're there is no God. Oh, but maybe this other mystic stuff, maybe reincarnation exists for them in a spiritual sense, but it's technically a physical, unexplained by science, pseudoscience thing. It's like the ancient aliens, New Agery. They're atheistic. They don't believe in a God in the standard sense, an immortal creator or a pantheon or anything, a limited or unlimited deity, that they have spiritual beliefs. They can, but there's a strong correlation with a total rejection of the spiritual, up to and including the point at which the most zealous, for them, science is a stand-in for religion. Now, of course, the hard atheist says that's a good thing. They say, well, yeah, science is true and religion is false. So it's a good thing, what's wrong with that? It's an embracing of truth. But the hard theist says the same thing. If the hard theist is correct and the divine exists, and everything is way more complex on a spiritual level than we believe, then the world itself around us, the physical laws aren't really laws. They're simply norms that have been established by some cosmic totality. Some God established physical laws that they could break at a whim, so they're not even laws. In such a case, science no longer has an objective relevance within life, because at any given time, the law of gravity could work in reverse, if God willed it to be so. That would be the theists' argument against that statement of science as more true. Likewise, the hard atheists said, well, theology and all that stuff is bullshit. They can't prove anything. They've had thousands of years, religion has, or theists have, to prove even one little thing, but so look at what science has done. Observably speaking, they would say, there's observable proof of the superiority of science. Again, unless you make that hard theist claim, that would actually be totally true. But I would say as well, that has nothing to do with atheism. Science can also coexist with religion. I can't remember who made the quote. They said, at the first sip of physics, you become an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. I can imagine, yeah, once you get to the realm where you're talking about all of these spooky dooky things within science that don't even be, anytime you solve a problem, it raises 2 or 3 more questions to solve, to the point at which you can honestly say you've actually learned basically nothing, to the point at which everything becomes, you could probably lose your mind studying too much science. If you were too smart and you delved too deeply into science, you could probably drive yourself into religious frenzy, probably become a berserker, so as total zealot. End up becoming a hermit wandering off in the woods. I think we understand now why they give scientists high salaries. Oh yeah, take the $500,000 grant. Snort the coke if you want. I think, wasn't there a scientist at some point? I can't remember whether this was a joke story or whether it was real. You'll have to, if you know what I'm talking about, tell me this. I read somewhere, again, I can't remember if this was a gag or whether it was true, that there was a scientist who won like some major award, and then basically they ended up broke because they snorted it all up their nose. I can actually believe it. You know, cocaine's a hell of a drug. It's also a hell of expensive. It's possible. I'm sure stranger things have happened. I'm sure these people notoriously, they like their whiskey. They like their alcohol. I wonder why. Now, could it be that they've lost all faith in humanity and life because they get to see the worst of it all the time and realize how dumb people really are, generally speaking? They're like, I'm uncomfortable being in this world. I don't want to live here anymore. But I reject hard atheism on the same basis that I reject hard theism. I don't reject the softer sides. I say the soft atheistic non-belief argument and the soft theistic it's possible and I believe it argument, no problem with them, number one, on a moral basis. A good thing for humanity to have that debate potentially, number two. At the very least, it's philosophical and mind-expanding. It's good that people talk about spiritual things, even if a lot of them are full of shit and don't know anything. They haven't read anything other than whatever religious handbook belongs to their particular religious path. But I have to reject the hard sides of the argument, because they've made a claim for which they can never achieve, apparently, the burden of proof. Or if they can, if it is possible. If it's possible to prove hard atheism or hard theism, they haven't yet. Until such a time, I reject both sides and say, well, pony up the proof. And of course, both sides say, no, the burden of proof is only with the other side. I'm saying it's self-evident that there's a God because we exist. Therefore, the atheist has to prove that it's wrong. The atheist says, of course, well, you know, the theist hasn't proven anything. They're the one making the claim that there's a deity. I'm just saying that, fuck that, it's not true. Well, you're making a claim as well. I reject both of these sides. I think it's better to reject both of them. Sometimes I think people assume that I'm a hardline atheist. It's like when I criticize religion, a lot of times people trot out the Shrek fedora thing and they ship post it across my posts, especially on Twitter. Or they say late tips fedora and stuff like that. But it's like, it's not atheism that I'm involved with. I'm anti-religious because I believe religion is largely a negative thing in the world. If I were criticizing a non-Abrahamic path, by the way, you probably wouldn't use fedora meme because you wouldn't mistake it for an atheist's argument. It's not an atheist's argument, it's a pagan's argument, quite literally. An occultist's argument. I understand enough about the spiritual world, enough about logic as well, to reject these hard arguments because they're not logically coherent. They don't make sense. I know there's no God. Okay. Have you searched every corner of the universe for a potential being that would rise to the level of a deity according to a human? No, you haven't. For all you know, there could be routine, mundane aliens out there who live forever because they've mastered all technology and they can like use black holes to travel around and destroy whole planets with their mind, with a computer. That would be kind of like a god. Their technology would be so far beyond ours, you might as well call them at least a demigod, or a deity of sorts, a de facto god, you could call it. The atheist probably wouldn't use that terminology. They say, no, it's just a life form with really advanced technology. Well, the ancient alien enthusiasts basically say that's why we have a conception of gods in the first place. It's like the Anunnaki or something. Maybe it's true. Maybe the Hopi are correct. The Blue Kachina is just a spaceship, and people were basically drugged up servants mining gold for, you know, a bunch of Sumerian overlords at some point. And then we, you know, Enki came along and did genetic stuff to us, gave us a better brain, and then taught us like rhetoric and logic in secret because he's Lucifer, he's Prometheus, a cosmic rebel. Maybe that's true. I can't disprove it, so I can't be a hard opponent of that argument either. Anything for which no burden of proof can ever be achieved, because of the limits of mankind's ability to explore something, shouldn't be summarily rejected. You can question it. You could say, well, you know, I want more proof of it. But going in the other direction and claiming a gnosis that it's not true because you're skeptical of it doesn't make logical sense either. That's about all. Peace out.